What's up, my comic book brothers and my comic book sisters from another mister? Today we're going to do a comic book review of Spawn, issue number 174, The True Origins of Gunslinger Spawn, the first Gunslinger Spawn, because there are two. We're talking about the first one. We're going old school here. Brought to you by Rated Comics. Let's get to it. It's February 1881, the hill west of Colorado Springs. It was one hell of a winter. Only a damn fool or a desperate man would be riding out alone in that blizzard like that. And this brother, according to this narration, he guesses he was both. But thank God for his buffalo hide coat. He got it from a private in the 9th, who took it as spoils of war from the Comanches during the State Plains Uprising in '74. A buffalo coat for a buffalo soldier. Now the numbing cold had an effect on him, and he began to see images forming. Like a drowning man, his life passed before his eyes. And we get this flashback, and the narrator talks about he conducted himself well against the renegade Indians of Kansas and Colorado, was mentioned in letters 4 times, and rose to the ranks of sergeant. Later, he was obliged to change his name to Henry Richard Simmons, but back then, he was Francis Charles Parker, the son of cotton slaves, an officer of the United States Cavalry, and equal of any man. Or so he thought, until they were posted to Fort Concho near the town of San Angelo, Texas. And he's heard that General Sheridan once said, if he owned hell in Texas, he would rent out Texas and live in hell. I would not argue against it because it was just that bad of a town. Things were just that crazy. Relations with the citizens of San Angelo were never easy, but they came to a head a few months later when one of his own in the United States Cavalry got shot. Now, when the men heard of the murderer and that the criminal was walking free and bragging about it, there was no holding them. So he rode along with his comrade, to the saloon where it happened, and some of the men had put together a declaration which was duly delivered to an attentive audience at the saloon. In other words, they demand justice or death, and someone must suffer for what happened. And one patron's like, okay, happy to oblige. But Henry Simmons noticed that. His cool head and steady hand, he drew first blood, and all hell went loose in that saloon. Now, what really happened there? Because so much happened there that no one really knows. Some say a dozen or more lay dead at the end of it. Some say that nobody was slain at all, but he can't vouch for any accuracy on any account. All he knew for sure is that once out of San Angelo, he considered himself a fugitive. He stopped only to gather a few possessions from his billet at Fort Concho, and then he had to keep riding like the devil was at his back, north towards Colorado Springs, to Alma, the love of his life, Alma. He lost count of the days that he journeyed. He was depending on the kindness of strangers to feed him. He knew he could not ride into Colorado Springs where the law would be waiting for him, so he headed into the hills above the city with the idea that he would somehow send word to Alma. A blizzard descended on him, and he thought he would have to give in to the stormy, icy embrace. It was so cold he thought he was going to die. If it were not for his fiance's smiling face, he would have nothing to live for. Then he saw him. He appeared from nowhere, as if he was conjured right out the snow, dressed all in white on a horse as black as death. Given at that distance, he could feel his eyes upon him. And then without a sign, he turned away and rode away. And he figured, as coatless as he was in this weather, there must be shelter nearby. So he followed him. He lost sight of the rider, but after a short while, he came upon a heartwarming sight of a cabin. The light was spilling from the door. It seemed welcoming enough, and the blood on the snow, not so much. But within the cabin was a sight that he could not turn away from. It turned his blood colder than the chill mountain winds. 4 children lay dead, with the woman who was their mother clutching a shotgun, defending them. She died defending her children, and they were brutally murdered. Now, he never heard the marshals and the deputies coming up from behind him. If he had drawn his weapon, then they would have shot him out of self-defense, or as they would say. They look at him like, Jesus Christ, look like we got a mess here, boy. You robbing the dead, boy? And they pin this on him, and he tells them, I didn't do this. I know who did this, said the marshal. And guess what? I know who you are too, Mr. Parker, calling him by his birth name. We have the Telegraph here. Heard news of trouble down in San Angelo too. So we know you caused this trouble, and we trace you over here. So guess what? Until the meantime, they're going to hold him at a jail in town until the snow abates. And this marshal tells them that the military prefers a firing squad to a rope necktie. That's a civilian's death any man could hope for. And Simmons like, well, I was hoping to die in bed with my wife holding my hand and a dozen grandchildren sitting by me saying prayers for me. Well, as they arrived into town, Simmons saw that man in white. once again, and Simmons points him out. Who is that man, Marshall? And Marshall's like, are you snowblind or something, or dreaming, son? There's no one up there. Okay, well, that's a trip right there. So they get into the jail, and the marshal tells Mr. Parker, calling him by his birth name, not the new name Simmons, make the acquaintance of Jeremy Winston, more commonly referred to as Hero Old Job. It was his family that was massacred. He killed his own family, said Simmons, and this Kemper brother is like, I'll rip your lying lips off your mouth. It was Kemper's man, and you know it. Set that murdering jackal in front of me without these bars to hold me, and I'll persuade the truth from him. This brother has some tongue right there. And the marshal's like, chill, man, you'll have your day in court. Now Silas will watch these two over you. No visitors will set foot in his office until I return. You got that, Silas? And Silas is like, okay, I'm just gonna drink my whiskey, then I'll give him all due respect. And Kemper's like, don't you think I'll spare you, Marshal? I'll visit my vengeance on every last soul who draws breath in this god-forsaken hellhole. And keep in mind, we did cover who Kemper was in Gunslinger Spawn Origins Explained video. I'll put the link in description as well. And by the way, if you're liking the content so far, you know what to do. Like the video and subscribe to this channel. But with all that being said, let's get back into the content. Silas pours himself an old nice glass of whiskey. And he tells Simmons, you better get used to old Job sermonizing. He used to be a preacher before he went native and set up the house with that Indian squaw. Lord knows what kind of god he worships now. My wife has a name, says Kemper, and I'll give my allegiance to any god or devil who grant me a single day of freedom to pay back the blood of my wife and children. You will hobble your lip and give me some peace, says the Silas. He wants to drink his whiskey. So Simmons asks him what she called, what's your wife's name? Kimmy. That's a good name, says Simmons. She was a good woman, says Kemper. So Simmons asks, what happened? Who is this Kemper fella? He tells his story. It's about he lived peacefully enough on his own land. For 2 decades, he trapped fur and traded honestly with the people of Bane. Then he tells him silver was struck upon his land, and Kemper made an offer to buy his land and to buy his home. But Winston tells Kemper there's no price that will buy his land or his home, and here he stands. Now, later on, he wasn't there when his men returned, and his conjecture is that they thought they could intimidate my wife and child, but they don't know Kimmy. She don't cotton much to intimidation. They murder them all, and not one man in this town will lift a finger against the guilty party, so I went after him myself. I put down 2 of his lackeys before I was subdued. It's their blood you see on me. He'll spill the blood of every bastard in this town and bathe in it gladly. That could be arranged, says the man in white. Once again, he appears with no forewarning. The deputy was dead to the world, although he only took him 1 glass of whiskey. Come on, lightweight. So the man in white asked him, gentlemen, what would you do to leave this place? What would you give? And Winston's like, what price are you asking? The only thing you guys got left to barter, that's your soul. Says Winston, I imagine the devil with the ruddier complexion. Do you think the devil has the inclination or the time to barter for a single human soul? He'll have it when the time comes, whether you will it or not. The one I represent is the demon Malbosia. And Winston's like, sir, you're clearly insane, but if what you're saying has any ounce of truth to it, I'm in. Let me do this. I'll even kiss the ass of the demon. Well, that's not required, says the man in white. What is required from you guys, along with your soul, is your eternal allegiance. In exchange, you'll be given the time on this earth and the power to achieve your heart's desire. And what do you suppose my heart desires, says Winston. Vengeance on the ones who betrayed and abused your family. And you can see in Winston's eyes, he wants to believe him because he has this rage of vengeance that he wants to fulfill. But at the same time, can this be true? And Simmons asks him, what about mine? You just want to hold the love of your arms again for one last time. And Simmons looks down in shame because he's tempted, but at the same time, he can't fulfill it because his wife would not want a man who's given up his soul. She would spit in my face. You intrigue me, says the man in white. I made this offer many times and I've never been refused because I know in advance the man I seek. This time, I'm not certain. I'm drawn to both of you. I must be sure that I make the right choice. The hell with your philosophy, says Jeremy Winston. Simmons has refused your offer. Now let me free because I accept your offer. And the man in white's like, no, I think not. You doubt me. In order to make this pact, you must believe. You are right, Job. Kemper will not let you live to stand trial. When you are looking death in the face and you will, then I'll ask again for the final time and you will accept. And what will that be, says Winston. And the man in white's like, well, I believe that's death knocking on the door right now. And death does knock on the door, and these marshals are like, unlock these men, we got to go into trial right now. And one thing that Winston notices is these men do not see the man in white. He's standing right there as plain as a boy on the whore's backside, and they don't see him. So they proceed to, to the hanging. And the prisoner known as Old Job is hereby condemned to hang by his filthy neck until death, and the Simmons with him. I'm not gonna say that. They want the brother hung by his neck too. One marshal suggests we should use longer rope so the drop stops her neck, but the other marshal's like, nah, Mr. Kemper wants the rope short so the crowd here can have a show, and he wants to see Winston struggle a little bit. And before the drop begins, Winston sees the man in white. Now we'll see if his offer is good. And he tells him, I'll take your offer now, demon. So the man in the crowd, Mr. Kemper's like, what the hell is he raving about? He's a loon, Mr. Kemper. Always was, says his comrade. I'll see each and every one of you in hell, says Winston. The drop starts. Simmons, all he can say is his last words, is the love of his life, Alma. Now what happened next, Simmons remembers as one long nightmare. It began as the rope bit into his neck and his vision turned red. Above the ringing in his ears, he heard the voice of the marshal. Cut those two men down, says the marshal. Damn it, I should have gone for the long rope. That way the death would be quicker. And this man wants to end this death and get on with the road, you know? So he wants to kill the Bible curse thumper Winston first. As he lifts his shotgun, ready to take aim, the man in white touched the shooter's arm. No more than that, just a touch, and his life was spared. Simmons' life was spared. The last he saw before he passed out was his face, his damn face. So Simmons wake up and he's like, how is he? He'll live. No, this isn't right, says Simmons. Don't try to speak. You just been damn near choked to death, says the doctor. He wakes up at the doctor's office. Rest easy now. I turned him down. It was Job who made the deal. It was Job who should have died. And the doctor's like, Job is laid up in my board office. For good or ill, the old bastard has breathed his last breath. So unless Jesus Christ himself passes by him to raise him, we'll see no more of old Job. And Job, Winston, wakes up, eyes wide open, and his transformation to Gunslinger Spawn begins because the deal he made, the deal came through. How does it feel, says the man in white. Does your new flesh suit you? It feels like dead meat. Well, then it's done then. No turning back. A deal is a deal. You belong to Malbosia now. Here, take a look in this glass. And as he looks in the glass, it's an awful sight that he looks at, but you know, he's fine with it. It's the last sight those sons of bitches will ever see. So the man in white's like, good, I brought you your clothes and your weapons. With the recent deaths accounted for, the population of Bane stands at 257. You think 24 hours would be enough? Start the clock, my friend, says the new Gunslinger Spawn, and let the killing commence. And that's where we end this issue of Spawn, issue number 174. Obviously a lot of story here, and this is a real true origins of Gunslinger Spawn, the first Gunslinger Spawn, and I got to say I'm glad I went old school with it. Link in description if you wish to add this comic book to your comic book collection. And also, this is a key issue, the first appearance of Gunslinger Spawn, so as the new Gunslinger Spawn ongoing series becomes more popular and ongoing, and who knows, will Gunslinger Spawn make an appearance in a show or a film, this comic book will rise in value because it's already worth a few pennies. I should say it's worth some coin at this point in time. But with all that being said, Spawn issue number 174, what did you guys think of the comic book? Comment below, let me know. And if you happen to invest in this comic book, hey, hold on to it, get it graded, preserve it, keep it, because I believe this comic book will rise in value. Just a personal investment tip if you wish to do so. But I'm not a financial guy, but this comic will rise in value in my personal opinion. And if you like the content we're throwing up, you know what to do. Don't be shy, don't be stingy. Here at Rated Comics, we do awesome comic book reviews, comic book related content with the occasional comic book giveaway. Thank you again for watching. Until next time.